Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Glazov gang. I'm not Jamie Glazov. I'm still Josh Brewster filling in for Jamie Glazov. And this is still Dwight Schultz, actor, voice actor, man about town, ne'er-do-well, etc.
Ne'er-do-well. Maybe Jamie Glazov before this is over. But
that's right. Now, Dwight, we were just talking about your acting work, and I wanted to talk to you about what I call the all-new Hollywood closet.
Yes.
And to me, the new Hollywood closet is not for gays and lesbians. It's for conservatives,
yes.
People who are afraid to say who they are and what they believe. And I wanted just to touch on that. So tell me about your experience as being a conservative in Hollywood and keeping your mouth shut, but then maybe it's time to open your mouth and say things that are on your mind and when you decide to do that.
I had always found actors who spoke out politically to use their personas. I mean, let's face it, we're light and shadow in show business, light and shadow. And there's an element for many of just pure sexuality to a degree, or of entertainment. And to use that for political gain I always found that reprehensible. And Hollywood being a very, very liberal place, it's very, very difficult to work in the environment because actors are very political openly in Hollywood. Not so much in New York. I found New York to be very different. I think it was because of the theater. It's so much hard work involved. You don't have time for the small talk, which ends up being about politics and who the president is and this and philosophy and Marxism and nonsense. I lost a lot of friends because on a very personal level at dinners I would come out and speak and be political. But I always held my tongue whenever I was in the public forum, whenever. And around 2000, I found Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton both just abominable. I mean, I just could not stand them. And it was around 2000, and Julia Roberts came out and said Republican in the dictionary is somewhere between reptile and repugnant. Now, she was talking about me. She was talking about me. Now, if Julia Roberts is going to come out and talk about me, why am I not talking about her? This vapid, unintellectual mouth. And that's the only reason she's a millionaire. She doesn't know it. Yeah. She doesn't know that. So she opens her mouth and her pocketbook and thinks that there's something coming out of it that's enlightening. And so I was furious. Then we have 9/11. And I was devastated by 9/11. And we have Bill Clinton at Georgetown University saying, we have something to do with that. We're responsible in some way. It was one of the, you read his speech, it's filled with ignorance. Historical ignorance.
There was a can of worms of self-blame that came out after.
And he said, I wish it had happened on my shift. Oh. So I could have, a guy who loathed the military wants to, it's interesting. He loathes the military but wants to be commander-in-chief. It's the same with the president that we have now.
Right.
I find this reprehensible, and I said to myself, after 9/11, and it's an irony, I was in a, and I knew this was going to be the last thing I did in front of a camera. It was a television program called The Agency about the CIA. And I was talking to a crew member, and a very innocent person, believe me, but she said something that just sent off candles and bombs and explosions in my head, which was, we were talking about 9/11. And she said, I don't have any connection with that. I don't feel a connection to that. And I went home that night and I cried and I was angry. And I said, I have to become involved now. That's it. I have to use whatever talents I have to say, that's the wrong. You can't watch what happened in New York City in this world and say, I have no connection to it.
Sure, and it's galling when you hear Western people blaming themselves. But now let me ask you a question. After 9/11, in the post-9/11 world, here's the thing. Dwight, do you think that conservatives in Hollywood, that it's pure cowardice that they don't want to come out of the closet? Or is there a practical reason for not coming out of the closet?
No.
Because I hate cowardice. I like to blurt it out. I don't really, I don't get hung up on that, but I get it. Hollywood is just,
Look,
it is what it is.
It is. I lost so many friends on a private level, dinners, conversations. Somebody calls Ronald Reagan a name. I say, no, you're that name. Do you know that? They're going to call me that. Right. I said, why did you use those words?
Right.
Why did you? And when you actually confront them, Like Julia Roberts, I wish I could have confronted her.
Right.
You see the veneer breaks down. There's nothing there because it's all it's all I can do this and say it, and I'm supported by the media. Well, in real life terms, there are people who have wives and children, and they have to make a living they have to make a living. And it really is a death trap if you come out and start criticizing that which casting directors, most are women, and they are very, very liberal. And if you start opening your mouth around them, you're not going to work. And I don't believe there's a blacklist, but I believe there's a cocktail napkin sheet.
Sure. Even Dennis Miller, and he's a huge success, has said there's just places I'm not welcome anymore.
Yes.
And you can feel it. Now, I wanted to talk about one other thing that you and I had talked about earlier. The Republican Party, I have a view, Dwight, that the Republican Party doesn't want to include libertarians anymore, doesn't want to include conservatives anymore. They don't have a big enough tent. And the Democrats, they see the Occupy people, and Obama says, hey, we're with you. But the Republicans don't want to. Now, it was one thing that you mentioned to me. It's harder to galvanize conservatives to act because of their relationship, I guess, to individualism, et cetera. Can you tell me about your views on that, about galvanizing conservatives?
And the story, the only time that I've had a lengthy conversation with Andrew Breitbart was at a bar here during Obama's the first election. Obama. We sat down. Over an hour I talked with Andrew, and he and I we had hit it off in very short spurts, but we really solidified our views together here. And I told him when I first came to Los Angeles, I saw these ads for activists wanted. Didn't say what for. And Andrew laughed and said, yes. He says, that they're not talking about conservatives. How do they know? How do you know? Well, conservatives are not activists. And I said to him, and I said, yes. I said, it's very difficult. You are going about trying to coalesce, get people together behind conservative thought to confront what you and I both see as a leftist takeover of the country. It's very difficult. And he said, yes, well, think about it. He said, if you support the Constitution, you are for limited government and limited power. You are for a decentralized power if you support the Constitution. If you're a totalitarian at heart, you're just the opposite. You want the centralization of power, and you see yourself in that power because that's what you want. It's very hard to get a bunch of people who don't want something to come together for something that they don't want.
And that is also what shocked people about the Tea Party. What shocked them about that was that it was a lie. They saw a lot of Caucasian, middle-class people, not entirely Caucasian, middle-class people protesting. And if that's happening, well, then, Dwight, they must be white supremacists or racist. I mean, this is nonsense. All they are is fiscal conservatives. And and I'm really getting annoyed with the Republicans because their isolation of the Tea Party is galling to me. It's absolutely galling.
I agree with you.
I mean, let's move on to a couple little word association things here that I wanted to touch on. Let me name some names.
Don't touch me, by the way.
Right? No,
if you touch me, this interview is over. Okay? I saw you reaching out.
I understand. Okay.
You're just like Jamie.
Whittaker Chambers.
Whittaker Chambers. When I read his book, Witness, it solidified everything that I had thought about in my formative years. After I read the Communist Manifesto in high school, you realize that something that sounds so utopian and so wonderful in practice is, he says, one of the important lines is that those screams in the night that finally hit him. Yeah. That's the truth. Those screams in the night, and they have to be hidden, and they have to be muffled. And a lot of people that I've talked to have said that book, a lot of former liberals read that book, and that was the turning point.
David Horowitz,
Radical Son, in the media age that we live in today with the internet, he brought, it was just one of those extraordinary things. Here you have, I see David, and this is the truth, I see David Horowitz with a plowing up the truth and getting it out there and throwing it. Here it is. This is it. And I first came to know Jamie through his interviews. What amazing that this was available to me. well, the internet really started getting big in '96, and I can't remember when I first saw Front Page, but it was I came to it every week, and they were talking about the things that I've always been obsessed with, the whole communist period and the making of the atomic bomb and the infiltration of our government and our ideals by radical, totalitarian, atheistic ideologies. And I didn't understand how it possibly could have worked, and thought for a while that it failed. But it hasn't failed. It actually, and Venona, as I said to you, when Venona was released, the
that
cables,
proved Alger Hiss was guilty.
Well, it proved so many. Obviously. I mean, you know, the I.F. Stone was a communist. There were so many. So many revelations there. I made phone calls around the country thinking that this was going to change America. It was completely and totally, the importance of it was ignored. That's old history. That's old news. We don't have to worry about it. When in fact, it has told the story of our educational system, the lies that we are now, we're now suffering for, actually. And the truth, that truth needs to be told if we're going to move forward not as a leftist totalitarian society. And whenever I've talked about commies, and that's the way I refer to them, the Hollywood 10, for instance, so revered, nothing but a bunch of traitors, really. Yeah. Odd Man Out by Edward Dimtrick, a great book for anybody to read. The one thing that he came away with was that the Soviets, the commies, were great at one thing only: character assassination. And we're watching it in spades today. And
let's talk about your daughter for a moment. You have a wife, Wendy, who was an actress,
was an
right?
Actress, yes.
And you
blind date. We met on a blind date. We'll be married 30 years next year.
Excellent. And your daughter, Ava, I know you are very proud.
Very proud.
She's a Marine.
She's a first lieutenant in the Marine Corps. Very proud of her. An amazing kid who always took the hard road. And I don't know where she got it. She's a whiz at math. She can write. All these things that I always wanted to do, it's passed on.
And you raised her in Southern California, and she turned out all right.
Listen, let me tell you something. There's two things about raising a kid here in Southern California. When my wife was pregnant, the first question was, you don't want this child, do you? Are you going to have this baby? Yes, we're going to have it. Oh, yes. And the other was when she became a Marine, do you approve? And you approve? Yep. And you approve?
She served in Afghanistan.
She served in Afghanistan. But
Excellent.
Of course we approve.
Of course.
And that is Southern California, however, and the liberal ideology off the lips, the first comment.
Dwight, in our last few minutes, I want to talk about something you mentioned to me. The conservatives never seem to want to roll out the Gary Sinise, Dwight Schultz, the Clint Eastwood did the Republicans an enormous favor, by the way. And by the way, he's a libertarian. Yeah. So they're not that hot to him. You got to be this perfect dressed-down Republican, which is what's, by the way, getting the Republicans killed in every election now. But
Rockefeller Republican, it hasn't changed.
Yeah, really. They
hated Ronald Reagan.
They don't want to use Hollywood types. They have to start to bring out the personalities.
Listen, they hate Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah,
they hate him. They go after. I mean, what's his name? The guy who came out and attacked Sarah Palin, Smith, and I mean, listen. This is it in a nutshell. Sarah Palin. You may not like the way she speaks. You may not be comfortable with hearing that twang that she has. She said two things that were absolutely right on the button. She understood who our existential enemy was in radical Islamic, the Brotherhood, and she understood who the political enemy was. And she understood a leftist neo-Marxist when she saw it. Yep. When you're going to go through a grizzly bear country, do you want somebody who recognizes grizzly scat, or do you want somebody who has read Marx? What do you want?
And you know what else, Dwight? They have to bring out the personalities like you, not just the pundits. They need to bring out the artists and the creative people, I think, who are conservative.
Now, and they don't.
Quickly here, Michelle Bachmann talks about Islamophobia and that Obama wants Sharia law or whatever she was quoted as saying. She's been very brave. I think you're very brave. We're very brave here on the Glazov gang, but I got to tell you, I don't think that our concern over the Islamophobia charge, it doesn't resonate with Republicans.
Well, did you see the recent?
It doesn't resonate with Democrats. We're all kooks, right?
Did you see
We're all kooks.
Did you see the Wall Street Journal today?
Go ahead, quickly.
Did you see the military? If you're in the military, don't talk about pedophilia.
Right.
Don't say anything that is true.
Yeah, no, don't report the truth.
That don't report the truth.
Yeah. You don't have to give an opinion. You just have to report the truth to be an Islamophobe.
It is, we're living in a very, very, very serious period of decline, intellectually and in every other way. And we are going over a cliff. Even if we don't go over the economic cliff, we are going over another kind of cliff, unless the Tea Party types in this country stand up and start fighting.
More vocal.
And really,
we can't worry about political correctness.
And not blood. I'm not talking about blood. I'm talking about standing up and telling the truth and confronting those who are lying.
There are also worries about infiltrations of radical Islamists in our government, but that's a story for another show, and I'm sure we'll get to that on the Glazov Gang. A few things before I wrap up with Dwight. We're going to do some looks at books, okay, for some buddies of ours, okay, who make all this possible. The Kindergarten of Eden, How the Modern Liberal Thinks and Why He's Convinced That Ignorance is Bliss, by Evan Sayat. You like this?
That is an extrapolation of Evan's talk at the Heritage Foundation.
That was
phenomenal.
Yeah, that was
phenomenal.
Okay, and of course, our buddy Jamie Glazov, High Noon for America, The Coming Showdown. You can see mine's getting a little dog-eared. I keep reading it. That's what books are for, I've been told. And then, of course, the man, the legend, David Horowitz, and his new book is Radicals. So check that out. Now, I'm going to finish up with you, Dwight. I just want you to tell me, as we stand at the precipice of the fiscal cliff, what do you see coming down the line in the next month or two that concerns you?
Well, we have a Secretary of State who was responsible for the death of 4 individuals in a foreign country.
Will she testify?
She has yet to testify, right? How long has it been since we've lost 4 brave Americans, and the individual who shoulders the responsibility has yet to testify? And everything else, we've had a member of our representative to the UN testify.
And if she was a Republican, what would be happening to her?
She'd be dead.
She'd be dead in the media. Folks, here he is. Dwight, thank you.
Thank you.
Always, I got to tell you.
Thank you, Jamie.
This is a guy who comes out every week, and he always brings great game, but I thought it was time to sit down and talk one-on-one with Dwight Schultz. Dwight, thank you. And everybody else, Jamie, we'll be back next time.